God of Israel, as is proven by Deuteronomy chapter 28. Now, some of y'all have a couple of other issues, and since we posted some of the recent postings, some of y'all have asked some other questions about, you know, Ethiopian prophecy in the last days, where it speaks about, you know, Ethiopia joining with these nations, Gog and Magog, so forth and so on. We're going to address that, as well as how we should understand, you know, our ancient Egyptian links. There are links right there of ancient Egypt, of course, but you got to recognize this about Moses, that Moses, after his 40th, you could say, birthday, you understand, and after he murdered or killed the Egyptian who was seeking to harm one of his Hebrew brethren, you understand, he fled into the wilderness. Both so-called Jewish Talmudic legends and stories on one hand, we're just presenting all the facts, the proof that we can, you understand, that the Talmud even states that Moses went to Ethiopia, and Moses was a general in Ethiopia. Additional information we have in our Ethiopic documents and amongst the Beta Israel and among the royal archives of the King of Kings, and those AMHARIC and Qedest and Ethiopic documents that also prove that Moses spent about 40 years, and the Bible is the best proof, really, because the Bible says that Moses now is, after he leaves Egypt, he spends another 40 years in the wilderness being educated as the son-in-law, now get this, as the son-in-law of the Midianite high priest. Now, Midianites are descendants of Abraham by Abraham's third wife, Keturah or Keturah in the Bible. So now we have Moses being educated, you understand, in Ethiopia, you understand, by an Ethiopian as well as a Midianite high priest named Jethro. Now, it's very interesting because we know that the roots actually of ancient Egypt come out of Ethiopia. So when people say that Moses stole the 10 commandments out of Egypt, what they're failing to recognize is that there's more than one Egypt. You understand? There's two Egypts. So what happened, Moses went from the so-called, what they call Upper Egypt, and went into Lower Egypt. You understand? Or some say upper, lower, but basically he went from the Egyptian Egypt of the Mediterranean, and he went into the real roots. He went to the root of the Nile River Valley. He went to Ethiopia. And when Moses went to Ethiopia, and during his education under the Midianite high priest, under Jethro in the Bible, this is where he discovered the truth and recognized that his people were in a religious, psychological bondage and mind control, you understand, in this Egypt, which is much similar to the mind control that many black folks are in this spiritual Egypt today. You understand? See, since the election of Barack Hussein Obama, black folks are in that same sort of spiritual Egypt, and it's based on the same sort of principles if you can receive it. So there's a lie that you've been told where it says that Moses stole what he received by divine revelation from the same Egypt which he fled out of. No, because he spent another 40 years. Notice this, he was 40 years old when that incident happened. He would spend another 40 years being educated under the Midianite high priest named Jethro, would marry the Ethiopian Zipporah, you understand, who was the daughter of Jethro, the high priest of the Midianites, who were also known as Ethiopian. So those, I guess they had more than dual nationality, dual citizenship, because he's a Midianite by tribe, but he's an Ethiopian by nation. You know what I'm saying? So he went to where the new, the Ta Neter. He went to the root of the Ta Neter, and then he recognized even more correctly, according to the Ethiopic logic of Imero, what his people were under. And this is why his magic, you understand, or his knowledge, his metaphysical knowledge was higher than the Amen priesthood at the courts of the Ha-Sultan or the Berhane, Pharaoh's courts, or the house of the king, the Sultan, the Ha-Sultan or the Berhane, the great house. Pharaoh, well, you know, they'll say the Pharaoh, but we'll touch on that a little bit more in detail in the forward. So that's the reason why Moses, you understand, Moses had a higher knowledge, because he went to the root. Moses was more knowledgeable. You have to remember the differences between the Egypt that he came out of. He came out of the second Egypt, you know what I'm saying, and he went to the root, to the new, to the Taneta, and therefore he learned what they didn't tell the people, you understand, in the other Egypt. I know it may sound a little bit confusing to people, but you have to go and do some research on this, basically, to understand that. It's totally ridiculous to think, or to make the assumption, mistake, and pretending and assuming that the 40 years that Moses spent being educated by the high priest of the Midianites, by the Ethiopian Jethro, is not the reason why Moses knew what he knew. That means he went into Ethiopia, you understand, as the Talmud states, as Ethiopic documents states, as other researchers and scholars have found the evidence that Moses must have spent time in Ethiopia, because he did spend time in Ethiopia in the root. Because even the Egyptians of the Egypt that Moses came out of, they said that the gods dwelt in the new, in the far beyond, and they pointed in the direction of Ethiopia, where the headwaters of the Nile came from. And this is where Moses would spend another 40 years. You understand? It's almost like being a so-called, you're born into a Christian, say, family, right? Say here in America. So you're born into white supremacy Christianity, even though the root of it comes out of the East and comes out of Africa, but you're used to Christianity in the Eurocentric form, in that form, and for all the different denominations and everything. And then you happen to go to where Christianity really came from. You understand? And then you start to learn about, say, Ethiopian Christianity and the roots of Ethiopia and the Bible. And you begin to recognize, well, how did this other Christianity I believed to be the true Christianity, how did this come about? And then you start to study and see exactly in the historical stages and ages what happened and how the truth was watered down, how the truth was twisted and distorted, so forth and so on. Now, you come back from the East because now you have found out the truth of it. You know what I'm saying? So the truth that you know would be higher. The knowledge that you would know of Christina, or the true Christianity, the truth of Iyyesus Kristos, Yehoshua, would be higher than the watered down, whitewashed Jesus. You know what I'm saying? And this is what Moses also experienced. This is what Moses, the wisdom that Moses had, was he was learned in the wisdom of the Egypts. You understand? And therefore, he was able now to receive, you know what I'm saying, the truth of the King of Kings and his Christ for his dispensation and for that age. And this is God of Israel, as is proven by Deuteronomy chapter 28. Now, some of y'all have a couple of other issues, and